Welcome to the first edition of HVDN Live. Today is March 15th, 2021, and tonight we are going to be focused on a review of the Icom 9700 and Icom 705. So most VHF and UHF amateur radio activity is centered around repeaters. This is going to be a brief visual tour that explores real-world, non-repeater focused activities through these two unique radios, the Icom 9700 and the much more portable Icom 705. Here's a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Everybody is going to be on mute, so please, any questions, please hold them to the end. We will go through Q&A at the end of tonight, and we expect this to be about a 60-minute presentation altogether. So let me just first off and introduce Hudson Valley Digital Network. Something that's really core to HVDN is a theme called convergence. And this really has to do with the ability for us to use wireless spectrum. Of course, amateur radio is key to that, but there's many other hobbies that benefit by wireless spectrum use that could be licensed and unlicensed. And so some of these include makers, ways that you could use this to engage within the community, and to enable different types of active lifestyles. And some of the past presentations that we've done via HVDN, you can see at the URL here. This presentation will be also shared at that website as well, which is hvdn.org/presentations. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Neil W2NDG, and he's going to take us forward from here. Neil, over to you.
All right. Should we swap share screens here?
Yep.
All right. I'm sorry, just bear with me. Still getting used to your Jitsi. All right. Yeah, that should be better.
Perfect.
All right. So you all know Steve, K2GOG, who started speaking. I've known Steve quite a while. We're both, as I always say, Long Island refugees. And Steve has taught me, about the fringes of ham radio a little more, things that I haven't been interested in or involved in as much. And one of the things that we both have a passion for is combining our interests. So for me, it's combining computers and radio. For Steve, partly that, but also just the maker science community and radio, and the outdoors and radio, which is one of the things that I think drives him to be the POTA SOTA hiker with an ultralight radio. So Jim, WA2UMP. Jim, I don't know you as well as I know Steve, but I know our paths have crossed in the DMR world. And Jim is one of the most knowledgeable people I know that I've met in the hobby, an expert on many technical topics, and I hope to learn more from him in the future. Just real briefly about myself, I'm an IT professional. I've been a ham for 10 years, but I've been around radios my whole life. I speak on various subjects around the hobby, mostly at Ham Radio University, but also for all the local clubs. I run a couple of nets and classes myself, including a maker's class for the LICW group, and most recently a science and technology net for the OMARC club. Also, I maintain a guide to available ham radio and radio kits online called radiokitguide.com. So here's some things that we're not going to focus on tonight. We're not going to display or discuss deep dive technical specifications of each radio. There are other places for that. Feel free to ask during the Q&A session at the end. This could go on for hours if we want to get that technical. We're not going to spend much time on focused basic functions. There's other places for that too. Same reasoning. We don't want to keep everybody through the night. And we're not going to make this sound like an Icom endorsement. These radios are unique, and that's why we chose them. And we're not going to cover things basically covered everywhere else in one short presentation. So we have a set number of topics we're going to go through, and then your questions can cover some of the missing holes. So here's a comparison also showing some size differences of these two radios. They're obviously very different radios, but in some ways have some of the same functions. The 9700 weighs about 10.5 pounds. And you can see 240 millimeters by 94 millimeters. One of the things that it doesn't show here, you can see the difference in size and definitely a huge difference in weight. The depth, the 705 is a much shallower radio. I could ask Steve with the battery for an estimate of how thick it is.
So I can answer that right now, Neil.
Yes.
So we're going to jump a little bit ahead, but there's a battery that you can attach to the back of the 705. Without a battery, it's a little less than 4 inches deep. If you attach the standard BP207, it maybe adds about another ½ inch. If you add the extended battery pack, it's maybe about another ¼ inch thicker than that. So again, it's still probably half the depth of the Icom 9700. But again, they're very different radios. If you have a desk, you're not going to really care how deep the radio is. But Jim's going to take us through some of the pros and cons next.
All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Jim for this slide. Am I driving, or is Jim going to share?
I think we're good where we are.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. First thing you'll notice about the 9700 is has a great display, very intuitive, and eye candy, if you will, which makes it pleasant to use. All right, you have the touch screen, which makes it easy to find things. My point of reference was the 7000, which was always hard to remember. If I had to change the power level, I'd have to look it up in the manual. You know, if I didn't use it in the radio in 2 months. But this, everything, you could pretty much figure it out without the manual, with a couple of exceptions here and there. What I liked about it was the state-of-the-art design. It's not only is it SDR, but it's direct sampling on 2 meters and 440. That makes it possible to give you very low noise reception and a host of other features. Okay, next one. Okay, so I already mentioned that the spectrum display and the waterfall makes it easy to tune across. If you see something, you can tune in, and there's always something to look at. And okay, go to the next. All right, well, you have D-Star, and we'll demonstrate that later. That usually I'm more into the DMR, but this does have D-Star and has some distinct advantages. Also, you can do FT8 and other digital modes on 2 meters and above, which is a lot of fun. Okay, next. You can get the full 100 watts on 2 meters, which may make a linear amplifier unnecessary. I don't have a linear. The 100 watts is pretty much, with a decent antenna, is pretty much all you need. And you get 75 on 440, and you do have 10 watts out on 1.2 gig. Haven't used that yet, but it's available. Okay, next one. Now, the next one is an interesting point. If you buy the optional GPS, the Leo Bogner board and GPS for 145 bucks plus shipping. It's extremely stable. It'll give you 1 hertz accuracy. So if you're on the band and somebody else is not quite on frequency, they're not on frequency, you are. So well worth the additional purchase for that money. I like having the most stable radio in Cape Cod, if you will. It can be used as a frequency reference, if you will. Okay. All right, and you have full duplex. You can receive on one band and transmit on the other, so that comes in handy, especially during satellite usage. Okay. Dual watch, that means you can monitor two same bands. No, not you can monitor 2 different bands at the same time. That's a typo there. If you're on want to listen to one part of 2 meters and another part, you can't do that, but you can listen to 440 in 2 meters or 1.2 gig in 2 meters, etc., etc. So it comes in a handy feature. And finally, there's a satellite mode, which makes use of full duplex, and it integrates nicely with a whole bunch of programs. So put that all together, and I found that this was an excellent radio. The stability was when I first looked at it, I wasn't sure about it, and we'll talk about the some of the cons. Without the Leo Bogner board of the GPS discipline, it's as stable as any other Icom transceiver. It has the same spec as your 7300 or the 9100, but nowadays we expect more. In digital modes, say for example with Whisper, if you're on 440 or 1.2 gig, you have to be accurate within 4 hertz. If you're going to buy this radio, I would recommend that you also get the Leo Bogner GPS. Okay.
We'll look at some cons now.
Okay. All right. It's not cheap. It ain't cheap. $1,500. So that was. I had to give it some thought, some soul searching, whether I was going to pay that much for a radio, and finally decided, life is short. Life is short. You got to have all the radios you want. So I sprung for the 1,500. Okay. Stability comes at a cost. There was a great deal of emails and criticism. Why couldn't Icom have made this as stable? Made it as stable with the GPS as without. So I really thought for a long period of time whether I should buy this radio. However, those that had the GPS, the optional GPS, were very positive about it. I decided to purchase, and now basically what I own is not only a radio but an expensive piece of test equipment. Okay, it's not a shack in the box. It only gives you UHF and VHF, so that may not be acceptable for all people. My previous radio was the 7000. And it takes up less real estate on the desk. So this is positive if you're a real heavily into radios, like a Motorola guy. He would turn his nose up at a dual band. Okay, so you can better engineer a radio if you don't have a shack in the box, but it's not as convenient. So there's a trade-off here. You get a better engineered radio at the shack at the price. The fact that now you have to pay for 2 radios and it's going to take up twice as much desk space. Okay, full duplex is only on 2 separate bands. That's seems to be one of the limitation of the design. For some folks, that might be a problem. And this maximum enjoyment requires computer integration. This is particularly true. They do have a satellite mode, but if you want to get the most out of this radio, you should integrate it with a program that will do satellites for you. And I'll demonstrate that very quickly later. Antennas and related control. Well, one thing is that, and there's been some criticism of this, if you have more than one linear, there's only one output that controls the linear. So if you have a 2-meter linear, that's fine. But if you have 2-meter and 440, there's no way to completely turn one or the other off. So that's considered that was considered a limitation in the device in the design. Not a limitation for me because the 100 watts I find adequate.
All right. And
okay, thank you.
Before we move on to Steve, I just want to throw a comment in, is that even at that cost, and we talked about the design and the layout and the wonderful display, one of the things here is there are a lot of people out there who already own an Icom IC-7300. The radio will look familiar to you if you have one. I do. And another reason for buying this is you have to have the matched pair. You just have to. So,
and I do plan to get that 7300 a little later in the year.
So, and the other thing I want to mention real quick here, and there was a time, if you haven't been around ham radio for a long time, that the big three, or sometimes we call them the big 3.5 manufacturers, used to make VHF, UHF standalone rigs a number of years ago. It was the norm. All three major manufacturers made all mode VHF and UHF rigs. It's nice to see one of them get back into it, and I really hope that this sparks the other two to start thinking in the same direction. I happen to own one myself, an older one, and it's definitely a lot of fun. And if you've never tried some of the modes on these bands, definitely something worth looking into. So, all right, and we're going to move on to Steve talking about the 705.
All right, so there's quite a bit to talk about, and we'll go through some things fairly quickly and move on to some good real demos. All right, so much like the 9700, it has the exact same display, so therefore you have the exact same experience. So it's very intuitive. You can control everything on the bottom of the display as well as by the physical buttons underneath it. So it's very easy to navigate this particular radio. Number two, so this is a portable radio. It is designed for low power consumption. There was an earlier radio called the Icom 703, which sort of looked like an Icom 706 and was designed to appeal to those that want to take out a radio in a backpack. And so this shares a lot of that same kind of common heritage from a low power consumption. You could run this as low as 7 volts and you'll get 5 watts output, which is actually very good, because if you're going out on a summit or somewhere else, 5 watts is usually more than enough. And so I don't see that as any major downfall. So moving on, number 3, or maybe number 2. So power and charging flexibility. The earlier Icom 703, you pretty much only had bare wires. This adds quite a lot. You have a power port on the side. It's like a coaxial 3.5 millimeter plug that if you hook up an external supply, it'll give you up to 10 watts at 12 volts. But if you want to charge the internal battery, you could plug in a USB micro cord on the side of the radio. That'll charge the battery itself, which is rather nice. And if you want to charge the battery, let's see if you could see the screen. Here's a battery pack, and this battery has like the standard tab. So if you had a drop-in charger, you could charge extra batteries. So there's lots of ways that you can power this thing. Moving on, number 4. So much like Neil has said, the Icom 7300 is a HF plus 6 meter radio. The Icom 705 offers the same HF coverage as the much larger sibling, but it also adds 2 meters and 70 centimeter coverage. And when you power this by external power, you'll be at 10 watts for all bands. Number 5. So this is where things get really unique and different. So the Icom 705 has built-in Bluetooth, and what could you do with it? Well, you can connect over a remote Bluetooth speaker, like this Star Trek one that I happen to have. So you can control the radio, push to talk, and everything like that. And then you can also pair it to a smartphone, and we'll show this a little bit later. So here's an app where you can control the radio over Bluetooth. And so this becomes really handy, especially if you're out and on trail. You can keep the radio in a backpack safe and control the radio from your smartphone and also talk over a Bluetooth mic. Next. So also it has Wi-Fi. So the Icom 9700, which is designed to live inside of a house, offers the same functionality, but it does so over a 8-pin Cat5 cable. The Icom 705, which is a much smaller radio, actually does that over Wi-Fi. So when you enable that, and you can probably see the little Wi-Fi icon on the screen, it'll create an access point. You connect to it over your computer, and that's how you can get not only full operation remotely on your computer, but also if you're not at home, you could actually dial into the radio remote. So as long as it has internet somewhere, you could be somewhere else on the planet, connect into this using the Icom software and operate the radio as if you were exactly sitting right there next to it. So it's very, very interesting. Number 6. So compared to the 9700, which is a full duplex radio, this is not a satellite radio. Most people would say satellite, you need to have full duplex, but there's a way that you can trick the 705 into split mode, and then you can use it on satellite if you know what you're doing and you're not going to be talking over people. So you can enable split mode on the radio itself, but if you want to do satellite and you're going to do Doppler tracking, it's best to do that paired to a computer, which will handle all the transmit and receive frequencies, and we'll probably cover that a little bit later. Number 7. So something I think the 9700 got a little bit of bad rap for is it is a true amateur radio. There is no frequency coverage outside of the ham bands. And if we think about other portable radios like the Yaesu 8817 or 818, a lot of people complain that reception above 154 megahertz was non-existent. So if you're outside in the wilderness and you want to listen to, say, 162 megahertz weather band, you cannot do that on a Yaesu 818 or 817. The 705, however, does do that. So you have the usual 136 to 174 megahertz. You have 400 to 470 megahertz. You add FM broadcast. You add AM aircraft band from 118 to 136. And then, of course, you have not only full HF, but all the way down to 30 kilohertz. So 30 kilohertz up to, I think, about 108 megahertz continuous. And then it restarts back up at 108 to 136, then 136 to 174, and then from 400 to 470. So it doesn't receive everything, but it comes awfully close to what you would probably really need. And lastly, number 8. So this could be a pro. Customization with aftermarket accessories. So if you like to buy gadgets like tripods and microphones and antennas, you have lots of ways to customize this radio to your particular way that you want to use it. So if you like to spend money, this radio is a good gateway to doing that. All right, now let's look at the bad sums. All right, so cons. Much like the 9700, it's expensive. Not as expensive, but pretty close. Number 2, it is a portable field radio, and the thing that irritates me the most is it does not have standard APRS. Every radio that Icom has ever put out that has D-Star has not had real APRS. I think that's a major shortcoming. If they included that, I think it would have been a much better seller, but that's okay. I have other radios that I'll bring out on the trail with me, and they'll do real APRS. Number 3, so it's not as rugged as the competitors. The Yaesu, the Zygu 5105, and even the Electraft, I feel like they'll probably live outside better than the 705. You do have this big touch screen on the radio. The radio itself has a plastic enclosure. You do have to give it some major consideration for how you're going to use this, because it is not meant to take a drop. And number 4, so all you HF users, yes, no auto tuner, but that's if you're comparing it to like radios like the Zygu 5105 or Electref KX3. I don't really consider this a con. It depends on how you want to use it, but some people think that it needed an auto tuner. I would disagree, but I am saying for some people, they're going to see that as a con. Number 5. So I already talked about this. If you're interested in satellite operation, it's only semi-duplex. If you want to move around that with certain software like the Win for Icom suite, you could actually pair this radio in conjunction with a software-defined radio like an SDR Play, or you could also control a radio like the Kenwood D74, which is an all-mode radio, and you could use that as an extra receiver. But again, the 705 is not full duplex if you're interested in satellite. And here's kind of a con. So if you like spending money and you like accessories, well, guess what? Icom charges a heck of a lot more money for equivalents that you could buy as aftermarket. The matching backpack is overly expensive. It's nice, but overly expensive. They also have their own tuner, the AH705. It sells for, I think, about $400. It's not in the US market yet. It's coming soon. But a lot of people say that for what it is, for how large it is, which is roughly about the same footprint as the radio, even the Icom batteries are expensive. The extended life battery, I think, was like 130 by itself. So if you want to get fully kitted out in Icom gear, you could easily expend to go north of $2,000 if you just wanted the backpack, the tuner, a battery, that plus the radio. You know, let's wait and see what kind of stimulus check you get if you're looking for ways to spend it. So it's expensive Icom accessories. Number 7. Now, compared to the 9700, is this a shack in the box? Yes, but only if 10 watt is enough for you. If you were looking for something more than that, then this is not going to be the radio to use for you from home, except if you were interested in amplifiers and, you know, high-end antennas and things like that. And I think lastly, D-Star. There, I said it. I'm trying to add some comedy here. Much like a few of us, we have D-Star radios. I've bought them for almost every other reason. And so I consider that a major shortcoming of this radio. I probably would have still spent the same amount of money if it didn't, but I would have preferred to have spent probably $300 less if they just would have left out D-Star. So those are the cons.
All right. A couple of comments from me here. One of the things, as far as the frequency coverage and the layout of the 705, what I find interesting is I have an Icom 7100 sitting right next to me here. And it seems like they used, in many ways, the layout and the controls of the 7100 as a guide when laying this radio out. Because, yes, it does have the display from the 7300, but that's kind of where the similarities end. But definitely that band spread you were talking about is very similar to what the 7100 picks up, which is also a shack-in-the-box radio. So I find that interesting. I like this radio. You know, my problem is I want both of them for various reasons. I think a lot of us saw this radio and were somewhat relieved because this is what we were all kind of expecting Yaesu to do for a replacement for the FT817. And a lot of us were kind of let down when we saw the 818 and said, wow, that's the same radio. So it's Icom kind of proving that, yes, even though some of these other radios might be a little more rugged, we'll figure out how to pad them and how to carry them safely, because this is a really cool trail radio. Definitely something to consider. So, and yes, D-Star, the D word. All right. So we can look at A versus B here on this. I'm not going to run through and read everything, but you can see cost, portability. They're both SDR, but from different angles. Band coverage, which generally covers the overall purpose of each radio. And of course, wattage. But we always have to remember the 705 is a portable radio. Yeah, you could use it with a fancy amp on HF, but you're not going to get amplification on both HF and VHF and UHF in one package. It would be neat to have a portable with full duplex, but it would definitely add to the complexity and certainly add to the cost at this point. The 9700, like most of the all-mode VHF, UHF rigs before it, is specifically ham bands. And I think that has a lot to do with what it takes to make a quality VHF, UHF receiver. And I think that if we, did technical head-to-head and pulled out the multi-$1,000 test equipment, you'll find that the 9700 is probably going to outperform the 705 if we really boil it down to the nitty-gritty. The Ethernet connection on the 9700 is a neat feature for those of us that have the 7300, and we're all looking at that going, I want that, because it is a little clunkier to get the 7300 online. So, but the idea of the 705 having Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, I mean, this is something, these technologies have been around for a long time. Why hasn't every ham radio had this for the last half decade? I really want to know that. This is something that should be a feature in almost any radio. So both great sets. And like I said, I'm unfortunately going to have to figure out the budget to buy one of each. So, Steve, you want me to quiz the two of you on these?
Yeah, so now what we're going to do is actually do some, not just talking, and some more doing. So we're going to go through a couple different actual live demos and show people how to do different things. Nothing super earth-shattering, but we're trying to keep this to 60 minutes and leave enough room for some Q&A. So first up, I'm going to let Jim do some magic and show that you don't need to use repeaters for everything when it comes to VHF and UHF. So I believe he might have some ringers on the side, and we can do some single sideband, FM, and even D-Star, and not using the internet. That's the most important thing. So if you're ready with your folks, Jim, I'll let you see if we can make that happen.
Sure. Okay. All right. So let's see what we can do with this 9700 without using repeaters. And I have to say that I also use it on repeaters, and it works pretty well. But there's quite a range of other things you can do with it. So let's start with some basic things. And as I mentioned, it has intuitive controls. If you want to go into the menu, it's pretty easy to see where you want to go. So we're going to press voice. And since I don't like to hear myself talk too much, I have a recording here. And I'm going to call CQ on FM simplex, and we'll see who's around this evening. Here, I think this is because I have the
control
I also have it. I'm just going to call CQ, and we'll see where we go. This is W2NDG calling and listening on 145.525 FM simplex.
Recording is on.
W82UMP. All right, not hearing anything out there. The other demo was supposed to be for D-Star. So to go to D-Star would be very easy. All I have to do is go to from FM and press the DV. This is W82UMP calling and listening on D-Star. All right, well, I guess Mike may have stepped away from the radio, so we'll have to come back to that. So let's take a look. We'll also demonstrate the fact that you can control the radio through remote control. All right, so if I come over here, I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, Mike says he's there. W1MLL, WA2UMP. Mike, are you copying? I'm on 145.525.
You have an antenna connected, right, Jim?
Of course I do. All right, so let's see what Mike is saying. Oh, he's on a different frequency. Hold on, guys. I guess we didn't.
There he is.
You're on the same frequency. Here we are. All right. W1MLL, WA2UMP.
This is W1MLL. Hear you loud and clear. I think we had our frequencies a little mixed up, but here I am.
Okay, Mike, very good. I hear you loud and clear on D-Star Simplex. And yep, in order to hear each other, you have to be on the same frequency. All right, so you're sounding very good, and D-Star on Simplex is pretty good. Now I'm going to quickly switch modes to FM, and we can do an A/B comparison. So all I have to do is press FM. Okay, W1MLL, W1MLL, here's WA2UMP. Do you copy, Mike?
This is W1MLL. Jim, I copy you loud and clear.
All right, very good, Mike. And different voice quality. You can hear the background noise with the on analog, but so far so good. Thank you for the demo. And now we're going to QSY to sideband frequencies. So let's, I'd like to share my screen. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now here, and I'm going to demonstrate at the same time another tool. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, this is interesting. I can see a message there from Mike. Look at that. Isn't that cool? All right, so basically what you see now, we're looking at the remote software, the RS-BA1, and I should be able to now just move up frequency here. One way to do it is to go into the memory. Looks like the memory is not set up. Right, so I'm going to do this here. Let us go up frequency. All right, so as you can see, we're on an FM. Not sure why that switched back. Maybe if I go up. There we go. The remote software wants to take control. All right, so it's fighting me. All right, so here I am, and there's a couple ways I could call. If I just hit transmit. This is WA2UMP, WA2UMP, calling and listening. WA2UMP, calling and listening on 144.2.
WA2UMP, WA1NLG. I didn't hear you transmitting, but I'm watching you, so here I am.
All right, I don't, let me kill the remote, and we'll just go to, turn this back on.
You know, I think what probably is happening, Jim, the software was trying to override your audio path, so it probably wasn't taking it from the mic. It was probably trying to take it out of the sound card.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't see power out on the meter when he's talking.
No, not seeing power go out. This is WA2UMP. Norm, do you copy? WA1NLG. Do you copy, Norm?
Sure, Jim. WA2UMP, WA1NLG, now, and that's a good thing. We're not too far apart, I should be booming in there.
You're 40 over. You're 40 over on the band. Okay. Thank you for coming back. And just tell us what radio you're using, Norm.
I am using an IC-9700, and it's a wonderful radio.
All right. Sounds good. Let's see if anyone else is there. If anyone else would like to come in, please call.
K1 Whiskey Tango, over.
K1 Whiskey Tango, WA2UMP. Wally, you're loud and clear. You're in S7. Go ahead.
Yep, you're about the same here, Jim. Thanks very much. Nice signal. And I'm running a Kenwood CS790 to a Tokyo High Power, 2 8 elements at 14 feet. Work in progress. WA3UMP from K1WT.
Well, it's working well for you, Wally. Okay, we're going to attempt to do one more demonstration now. All right, so I'm going to lower the volume, and we're going to bring up one other piece of software. Okay, and that is the satellite software. Let me plug in the cable. Oh, wrong one. This is Ham Radio Deluxe. We don't want to run that. That's an expensive piece of software, which I'm not willing to pay $100 for if this was a test version. So we're going to disconnect that. So we'll end that. We'll get rid of Ham Radio Deluxe. And now we're going to bring up the satellite software. All right. So here we are. And one of the things that the 9700 does well, it interacts nicely with satellite software. We're looking at a package called SatPC32. I have a number of satellites you can pick from a pick list. And in this column, you'll see all of the ones that there is at least some possibility of connecting to. And those are represented by these letters down here. If you want to pick one, for example, let's pick a common one. If we go to A, you'll see that is the RS-44, a Russian satellite. You can see that it's not anywhere in our vicinity. But if I was to point my antenna, it would be 155 degrees. You can see these two frequencies here are now on the radio, if you look directly at the radio, and it compensates for the Doppler effect. So about once a minute, it'll sync up with this, and you don't have to calculate any of the Doppler. So I bought this. Let's go to a different satellite. This is the International Space Station, just south of Australia. And you can see that the frequencies changed on the radio. So I bought the 9700 to expand my horizons and begin to get into satellites. I have a modest antenna, the elk log periodic. I plan to tilt that upward at about 20 degrees, 30 degrees, and use that. So haven't made any contacts yet, but plan to use this software and with the radio for that purpose. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Steve.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim, for those great demos. So I kind of cheated a little bit. I was out hiking this past weekend, and I took the Icom 705 for its first time out to the field. And so if everyone sees the video, I've created this orange box and added some connectors and some things onto the side of it. What I'm going to show next is I'm going to pipe in a video that I took, actually a pair of videos. I haven't edited them yet, so you're seeing some raw footage. So let me go and do that now.
All right, so I got my new 50 little base. Let's go first.
You hearing the video, Jim?
I see.
How are you?
But do you hear it?
Volume's a little low.
It's not very loud. If you can turn it up.
Better?
Better.
So that Star Trek mic that you see, I'm actually paired over Bluetooth to that, and that's how I was talking with Bill KD2UEN.
Very good to hear that there's some level of social activity happening.
So I'm not going to let this play fully through, but you get the general idea, at least on this video. So I was at 2,200 foot elevation up on Brace Mountain, and I have an Arrow to 2 meter and 440 antenna plugged directly into the side of the box. I was using the Bluetooth microphone to talk, and even though it was pretty windy, it was sounded fine to Bill. And funny enough, I was actually talking on the output of the OMARC 805 repeater with about 500 milliwatts. Bill is about 30 miles away from my location in this video. He could not tell that I was not on the repeater. So it was actually a pretty fun demo.
Well, you're really doing the nipper over here. You're doing 5.9 over here in Ocean Park.
So we're making Bill internet famous, 5 and 9. All right, so I'll pause that there. All right, so we could probably go through some Q&A on doing some other stuff with the 705. I'm planning a separate video to go through setting up the 705 to use software to do satellite. It would have been too complicated to do it live with how the software interacts with the screen share, but you could look for that on the HVDN video channel in the near future. So with that, let me send it back over to you, Neil, and see where we're at in the flow of everything.
All right. Some of the same things that we have on the list, one versus the other. I wasn't sure if you were going to show any of the D-Star activities on yours. I don't think so. And recording and playback of messages.
We can do that. So let's see. So if everyone's looking at the screen with the 705, it's fairly easy to set record up on this radio. The same exact functionality happens with the 9700 as well as the 7300. So when you go into the menus, you can go either function, and then you can call up a record function. You can also go to a quick function where you could hit start record. So in this case, I'm on the time frequency, 15 megahertz. If we wanted to change it while it's mid streaming of recording, you could do that. And so here's a FM broadcast on 101.5. And you can see on the spectrum scope, that's quite strong. And I can change the span of the spectrum scope. So let's see, we go. So if you look on the sides of this particular signal, you can see these two solid bars. There's some digital stuff like traffic and some weather and other things there that you can't hear, but they're digital. So this is a nice way that you can see things. But so now I'm recording. I'm going to go to stop. Now I got to switch microphones, I think. Okay.
You're in CW mode.
Yep. So you can hear some free advertising, I guess. So now we'll go to play. Oh. So when you go to your play menu, can't play while you're recording. So it automatically organizes everything by time and date stamp. So here's the 15th. It'll show frequency, it'll show time, and mode. So as Neil rightfully pointed out, if we wanted to hear what an FM broadcast sounds like in CW mode, we can see that. Or if I wanted to play this back, I can hit that.
With help from the Home Depot. Install a brand new faucet. Lay down fresh new flooring. To get ready.
So very easy. A nice function with the recording is you can have it set, if you transmit, you can record, and then it'll continue to record for a preset interval, and then it'll stop. So this is especially something that's helpful for satellite. Instead of it just having it record on Vox mode, you could set some other neat parameters. So if you've ever wanted to capture satellite contacts, maybe some interference, maybe a really unique QSO, again, the radio does HF as well as VHF and UHF. So I think recording is really helpful. For me personally, if I'm somewhere and I'm not logging, I rather, especially when it comes to satellite, I'll record my QSO, get the job done, and then after I'm home, then I'll just go back and listen to my recording and file it in my log. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a sense for the power of the recording capability for the not only 705, but the same function resides within the 9700 as well.
All right. We did see a demo of some software from Jim showing control. And actually, I know it isn't the Q&A time, but I was just curious real quick while we're running through these. Was that control over a USB connection, or was that through the Ethernet port? Do you know how is that control occurring?
The control was over my LAN.
Okay.
Of course, you could set it up to go over. If you open ports appropriately, you could have it go over the internet.
And I assume the 9700 has the old-fashioned CIV port as well that all the Icoms have. That 3.5 millimeter or 1/8 inch jack for control. I think they're still including that, so you can actually have dual control. But
I'd have to take a look in the back of the radio. I'm not sure. I seldom look back there.
That would be a question for Steve too. Did Icom retain the CIV?
Well, so on both radios, it's unique how they do CIV. Both do have the 3.5 millimeter jack. In the case with the 705, it has that. I find it totally useless because you can control over CIV over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So if anyone's seeing my picture, you can see I have the app up on my smartphone, and if you notice, if you're looking at the radio, you can see the frequencies jumping all around, and I'm twirling the virtual VFO knob on the smartphone, controlling the frequency. I can control modes, bands, filters, even the volume of the radio. So here's some static, and I'll go up to FM broadcast. So it's quite powerful of what you can do. One thing to note though, the 705, since it's so new, some software does not support it. So the different CIV address needs to be adjusted. But there's lots of details out there on the internet that shows more about that. But again, it's very easy to set up.
All right. And Steve, you may have 2 microphones enabled. We're starting to hear them diverge a little.
All right. Now you should just hear one version of me, right?
Yeah, that's all right.
Perfect.
No, it's interesting. And I'm kind of glad they still have the CIV port, because there are situations where you'll run into where it is handy to have both and 2 separate control paths. There are some situations where you can use both.
Oh, so one thing quickly to note, the 705, you could use a standard USB cord, much like I think the 7200, you can do that. So you can plug in a USB cord. If you had a 3.5 millimeter to USB, you could use that instead. or you can control it over Bluetooth, or you can control it over Wi-Fi. So it can basically do everything. And there's some software which is aftermarket, such as Win4 Icom Suite. Not only can you control the radio, but you could also have it talk to up to 6 different programs at the same time. So that's especially helpful if you say you want to use Win4 Icom Suite to control Doppler. Then if you want to have it do like a FL Digity software, or if you want to have it talk to like WSJTX or pretty much anything else, there's so much to talk about software, and it would require its own like 60-minute conversation just on its own.
No, that's very handy. That software you mentioned, using like a virtual serial port method to get multiple devices controlling it. Jim, when you set up the software for the 9700, because it is a little different having an Ethernet port as opposed to USB, was it easy or more difficult than other rigs that you've worked with when you set up the software?
Well, the fact that it used Ethernet was kind of transparent. Once you plug that cable in, you've got connectivity. What was a bit of a pitfall is that it's difficult to get all of this software to peacefully coexist. And as Steve mentioned, Win4 Icom boasts that up to 6 applications can talk at a time, and it will orchestrate through that. What I've noticed is that only using the Icom software and other off-the-shelf software, only one program can talk to the radio at a time. For example, sometimes I leave WSJT on overnight, so when I wake up in the morning, I can see who's on the 2-meter FT8. If I forget that's on and try and actuate and bring up the remote software, it's unable to make a connection to the radio because a connection has already made. So I found that a bit of something you have to watch out for. Sometimes it won't work if there's another program in there that's already connected. The other thing is one program will sometimes change one of the baud rates. And then you bring up another piece of software package, and it's suddenly, what happened? It doesn't work. My RT system software doesn't work. How come? Well, the baud rate was changed by another program. So I think in general I use 4 programs. I use the remote, the RSBA1. That's Icom's remote. I use RT Systems for programming, as well as the package that came with Icom. That works pretty good. I started to use SAT PC32 for satellite use, and also plan to use evaluate the Win4 Icom software. See if that's better in general. So a little bit, to answer your question, a little bit of trouble getting those packages to peacefully coexist.
Right. And Steve, because of the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi, we've seen the local remote, from your phone, but I would imagine that the 705 gets some cool features of being so connected.
Yeah, it definitely does, Neil. So one that would come to mind, I almost want to think it's more of like military expired. So let's say, for example, if you were camping and you took your 705, you put it in a backpack, you attached it next to the antenna on top of a hill, and then you went back down the hill to your tent and, took a nap, and then you woke up and you want to play radio. You can do that remotely over Wi-Fi and not even be next to the radio, control it, everything. That becomes a pretty fun capability, especially if you don't want to have to carry, say, 100 feet of feed line with you.
Cool. And are there, just real quick, I'm curious, when you have the Wi-Fi hotspot mode enabled and you log into that, is there a whole like mini web server and functions that come up when you connect to the radio?
Let me call it up on the screen. So let's see. I don't know how well everyone's seeing it. There we go. So there's WLAN on. There's an access point mode. So if I click that, You can have it do station connect to network, or you can have it connected directly to a device like a phone or a PC. Then you can set your IP address. You can have it time out if you want, if you're not going to be using it. You can name it, name. So for example, if I went on my computer, I would just see like any other Wi-Fi access device. I would connect to it, and then that's it. It's the most easiest thing I've ever done for any kind of remote software.
Nice. And, we're all familiar with those little embedded web servers that we have on everything from our DMR hotspots to our internet routers. So it's neat to see it on a radio. All right. And
let's move over to some Q&A. I'm
yes,
sure there's a lot that's built up in the past hour.
Start asking some questions about this. So.
All right, so I guess in terms of Q&A, we've put everyone on mute. If anyone wants to share some questions in the chat window, you can do that. Somebody's saying they don't have audio, which I don't understand, but hopefully you could hear us now. If you want to take yourself on mute, you could just click the button and go ahead and ask your question. And let's figure we'll go like 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So whoever wants to ask a question, go ahead and Neil will moderate it.
All right, I've got the chat window open. You can also raise your hand. All right, Joe, 82Z, what Wi-Fi security options are on the 705?
So you could run anything that's standard WPA and WPA2. So it's super secure, especially if you're looking to make a direct connection, or if you're connecting over your home network, it supports all the current Wi-Fi security protocols.
So no WEP for those of you who are still lugging around your old Windows 95 laptops.
Oh, one thing important to mention, it does 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi as well as 5 gigahertz. So it depends on whatever network you have, it'll connect to either. A lot of real cheap devices only do 2.4. This does dual band.
That's nice. All right. Any other questions? I mean, I've got one for Jim.
Sure.
I'm just curious, since you haven't had a standalone all-mode VHF, UHF rig before?
My present rig is the Icom 7000. Before that, I had an Elcraft K2.
Okay.
This is my first UHF, VHF standalone radio of that nature,
so,
and been enjoying it.
So comparing it to the 7000 and maybe any other rigs that you've tried over the years, probably the Kenwood Shack in the Box rig, or even the older Icom ones. Do you find the performance of the 9700 to be better, like they usually say a standalone rig is?
Well, the first thing, I'm always exactly on frequency. And when I get on the 7000, someone says, "Jim, you're off frequency." So I don't hear that anymore. And so that's nice to have. There's more to look at with the waterfall display and the spectrum. And it's easier to remember everything because the controls are intuitive. So that's what I like about it. But I never had one of the earlier UHF, VHF sideband rigs. The 7000 was my first UHF, VHF sideband rig. And this is a better, more modern design.
All right, thanks. And we had some questions going back and forth in the chat. Joe was curious if the 705 also had a wired connection, which Steve said there's room for it, but they left it out. And I think Steve's right, most likely due to power consumption issues, which seems to be one of the main goals for the 705. Joe is also asking about used all-mode 2-meter, 70 centimeter rigs It's hard to peg prices and particular models on these. They seem to go all over the place. Some of the rigs are in high demand and bring crazy prices. Some of the rigs, like the Yaesu 736R, which can actually be loaded upwards of a quad band setup, you'll see fully populated with the modules in good shape going for well over $1,000 used, which is insane, but there is a market for them. I would say if you're watching eBay and some of the ham classifieds, you're going to pay a pretty penny for a used dual band or more all mode. The best place to find one of these at a decent price is to scour the ham fests and get there early. That's all I can say.
Or Neil has a fun story.
Well,
share with us.
I attended a club meeting where they were having a bit of an auction to benefit the club. I won't get into who and where, but it was, whether it was weather or simply something else going on that night, we didn't have a whole lot of attendance and not a lot of people with money in their pockets. And there was a 736R on the table available. And jokingly, I said to the gentleman who had brought it in, you know, I'd take that, but I don't have a whole lot of cash on me. And he's like, well, how much do you have? And I think I had about $30 in my pocket. And he refused to take all of it because he wanted me to join them for coffee afterwards. So I ended up with my 736R for not a lot of money. It did require some tear down and reconstruction and installation of some spare parts that were included, but it does work well. Although it's only a 10-watt radio, it is a really good receiver on it. Excellent receiver. And that's one of the things you're going to get with the separates with VHF, UHF rigs like this.
You know, also, for a lot of people that are into weak signal UHF, you really don't need a lot of power. A lot of people will invest their money in antennas, especially if you're using satellite. You don't really need a lot of power. And if you do, then you're always going to want to buy an outboard amplifier. But I think the 9700 fills a unique gap because of how high of a power output it has on both 2 meters as well as UHF.
All right. Do we have
So
any
we probably have time for maybe one or two more questions? No more questions from the peanut gallery?
No, that's fine.
Well, I'm going to give a quick shout out then. So here's what came in the mail today. This is a official the Pharmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel mug. So to our dear friend CJ KD2IIN, who's going to be moving across the country to Vancouver, just want to give him a shout out. He's had a number of HVDN people on his channel. So just want to show him that we're supporting him via some swag purchases.
Okay, we had a technical comment here. I see that Gary from California, N6PAW, he says he's able to hear everyone except for you.
Yeah,
Steve.
that's a strange one. I'm sorry about that. But we are recording this, so if you want to hear what I'm saying, we'll make sure, if you want to drop your email to me privately, I'll make sure that we send you a link to the recording.
Yeah, that's strange. I don't see how to mute a speaker. So just for yourself. All right. So we've done the Q&A. There is one more slide here.
Yeah, and that I included a screen capture of an FT8 session on 2 meters using the 9700, and did talk with a actually it was a woman about 120 miles from my house, so from my QTH. So interesting stuff. Sometimes, you know, signals pop in from all over. Sometimes Canada will come in, and a lot of contacts I make in New Hampshire because it's a water route between New Hampshire and the Cape. So fun stuff.
All right. That's a display I'm very familiar with. It's one thing I haven't really had much chance to do is FT8 above 6 meters, and looking to try some of that out when the next VHF UHF contest hits. So.
So there's lots of special events coming up. You have the next VHF UHF contest coming up in June, 2 weeks before ARRL Field Day. HVDN, as well as a number of local clubs, will be participating in an event called Hudson River Relay, featuring Bannerman's Island. So that's going to be a great opportunity, I think, for you, Neil, to try your hand on some digital modes on 2 meters, and hopefully you can be part of that for it.
Yeah, and there's a gentleman that I've had speak at a club event that I was running before. I'm going to try to bribe him to come join us when we do the Bannerman event. And I would also like to get him in to present to the group at some point. And that's Thomas Price. And he has been a regular attendee and participant in the Greylock Expeditionary Force. And great presentation on VHF, UHF operating.
Well, that would be a fantastic presenter to have. Well, if you want to give us the outro, Neil, and we'll close it up for the evening. I'll just personally first say thank you for those that attended, and I'm sorry for anyone who had some audio issues. But again, thank you so much for your time, and look out for the replay to post. Jim, you want to say some final words before Neil wraps us up?
Thanks everybody for joining, and if you do have any questions, feel free to pass them along.
All right, and I'll mention that the main thing I learned here tonight is that I'm going to have to figure out how to budget for both of these. This isn't an either or for me. I think I want both, and I think Steve wants me to buy a 9700 because then he could buy my 736R, which I know he really wants.
And like I said, I'll give you 5 times the price that you paid for it.
Yes. And this has been fun. And I appreciate Steve inviting me to do this. I know I'm new to the group, but not new to presenting or teaching. One of my passions. And I really enjoyed doing this tonight, even though I have to admit I'm a little flustered from the crazy day that I had at work today. So, but thanks everybody for attending. Thanks for listening. And the shootout, knockout, there were no knockouts. This was a draw, in my opinion, but no bells were rung, no blood was shed. And let's go buy some radios.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.